I'm Nancy Combs. I direct the Human Security Law Center, and I am absolutely delighted to be welcoming you to this symposium. I'm not going to spend much time in introduction or on substance because the point is for people much more expert than I to be talking about these issues. But I do want to say that I can hardly imagine a more important topic. Our working assumption that we're going to be discussing, exploring today is that press freedoms are crucial, are foundational to democracy, and the democracy is foundational to human rights. And so it doesn't get more important than this. But before beginning, I want to give credit where it's due. This symposium was the brainchild of Kate Hoving, who is at the William and Mary Reeves Center. And Kate has the energy of 5 women and has been an extraordinary force, generating ideas, inviting speakers, and just being spreading goodwill wherever she goes. So it has been an absolute pleasure to work with her. Secondly, I'm soon going to introduce Rachel Sleiman as the moderator of our keynote speaker, but I wanted to thank her before then because she has also been an extraordinary force in making this symposium a success. She spurred my interest in press freedom for last year's symposium and was instrumental to the success of that effort, and has been just as instrumental in this, just as valuable in this regard as the symposium chair of the Human Security Law Center. Rachel has truly been a font of hard work and good judgment, and this wouldn't have happened without her. So with that, I'm going to turn the introduction over to Teresa Longo, the Executive Director of the Reeves Center.
Thanks, Nancy. I'll just begin by putting several exclamation points behind what you just said about Kate and Rachel. Thanks to both of you so very much. As we're getting started, I would like to say a few words about the Reeves Center for International Studies, especially for those of you who may not know about the center yet. It was established in 1989 with a gift from Wendy Reeves in memory of her husband, Emery, who wrote the book, The Anatomy of Peace. Also a notion very much connected to the subject of today's symposium. So I want you to know that as briefly as I can say it, this is what the Reeves Center does. We support and promote and participate in the internationalization of learning, teaching, research, and community involvement at William and Mary. And as part of this mission, we are really, truly pleased to sponsor this symposium, Press Freedom Under Attack, 21st Century Threats to Journalists and Democracy. It's always rewarding to join forces with the Human Security Law Center at William and Mary, and it's a pleasure to collaborate now with the Virginia Center for Investigative Journalism at WHRO Radio as well. Thank you all so much for that collaboration. The speakers that you will hear about today will bring extraordinary breadth and depth to the question of press freedom. We're about to engage in meaningful ways with a keynote speaker who has given voice to opposition leaders and with renowned panelists who have worked in the US, in Haiti, South Africa, the Democratic Republic of Congo, and Colombia. We will be hearing compelling reports and also joining conversations about the challenge to press freedom. And we'll learn more about the ways in which these challenges share certain characteristics. But I would also really like to add that this does not mean that the challenges are all identical. Conversations about differences will likely be revealing as well. What I would say I find most fulfilling about the structure of the symposium is this, that the very presence of so many talented people, journalists and scholars who are here today, this indicates that although the challenges to press freedom, which are challenges to democracy, are serious and strong, but so too are the courageous responses to those challenges. So thank you for being here. Thank you for all the work you've done. I will turn the floor back over to Nancy.
Thank you so much, Teresa. Without further ado, we're going to begin our keynote address, and I'd like to introduce the moderator for the keynote, who is Rachel Sleiman, a third-year student at William & Mary Law School. Rachel serves as editor-in-chief of the Comparative Jurist, which is William & Mary's international law blog. She is also a member of the Bill of Rights Journal and the Moot Court team. As I mentioned, she's also the symposium coordinator of the Human Security Law Center. So as you can guess by now, Rachel is a very, very busy law student. And she's here today in part because she just has a very strong interest in free speech, freedom of the press, and human rights. So no better person to moderate this panel than Rachel Sleiman. Take it away, Rachel.
Thank you, Professor Combs. And this morning, I have the honor and privilege of introducing Tikhon Dzyadko. He is a Russian journalist and editor-in-chief of TV Rain, Russia's only independent television news station. He and TV Rain are known for their critical reporting and interviews of notable public figures, including opposition leader Alexei Navalny, as well as Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. Tikhon is the former deputy editor-in-chief and host of the RTVI channel, and a former correspondent and presenter of the radio station Echo Moskvy. Thank you for joining us today, Tikhon, and without further ado, the floor is yours. Welcome.
Thank you so much, and thank you so much for having me here. Thank you for the invitation. I think speaking about the situation with press freedom in Russia is very important these days, especially. And if we are speaking about the situation with press freedom in Russia, the simple answer to the question, how is press freedom in Russia, is the simple question is very simple. There is no press freedom in Russia. The more interesting answer, the more interesting answer will be much more, will take more time. But let's go back 15 or 20 years. When Vladimir Putin became the president of the Russian Federation for the first time in 2000, it changed everything, because before it, in 90s, there was a real press freedom in Russia. There was the democracy. It was not like the grown-up democracy, but during the 90s, we had a lot of attempts to build a democracy after the collapse of the Soviet Union. And as a part of this democracy, we had an attempt of building the environment for the free press, which can influence the situation on the situation in the country, and which is being listened by the people in the power. Then when Vladimir Putin became the president, he very quickly realized that since he himself was a product of the media, because as you may know, 3 months before he was elected, no one knew who he was, and his figure was built by the media, by the TV stations. So he perfectly understands and understood that he was created by the media, and media could destroy him as easily as they created him. So one of the first things he started to do after he becomes the president of the Russian Federation, he started to put on pressure on the media. That's how the independent TV station TV was destroyed, a lot of independent newspapers, etc., etc. So when we look, for example, in the year 2010, we see that almost all independent media were taken under control by the government or by the businessman or by the company somehow affiliated with the government. And in a year 2010, our TV station, TV Rain, was created. We decided that it is really important to try to show to the people the real picture of what was happening in Russia and abroad. TV was still the very important device for Russian people, but there was nothing to watch on TV, only propaganda and some stupid shows. So we decided to create a new TV station with the new values, with normal values and with a normal attitude to the viewers. And pretty quickly we started to gain a lot of viewers. Our audience was growing, and by the beginning of this year 2022, our audience only in Russia was around 18 million per month, mostly on YouTube, also on cable networks. But the problem was that in 2014 we were cut off main cable and satellite networks on politically motivated reasons. But anyway, we had around 18 million viewers, which is a lot. The population of the Russian Federation is 140 million people. 18 million is more than 10%. Also, we had a website with around 5 million visitors per month, and our social media such as Facebook, Twitter, Telegram, etc. People in Russia, we saw that people in Russia were very much eager to get independent information, because it was becoming more and more hard to get information from other news outlets. They were all under the state's control. They were all full of propaganda, and they had a lot of so-called blacklists. They were not telling people about what was actually happening in Moscow and in other Russian regions, and they were not reporting on the frauds during the elections. They were not reporting on the repressions, etc., etc. That's all what TV Rain was reporting on. But then, of course, it has never been easy for independent media, and every year since the beginning of the presidency of Vladimir Putin, we saw how the legislation was becoming more repressive. For example, at the beginning of 2010s, they adopted this law on so-called foreign agents, trying to, they were referring to the law in the US, but I think that the law on foreign agent in the US is not good at all. But in Russian Federation, it is much more politically motivated, and it was used by the government to put pressure on activists and on independent media. For example, TV Rain was designated as so-called foreign agent in August 2021. The idea of this by the government was to show to the audience that we are the enemies of the states and that we are some sort of traitors, that we work for some foreign governments. But everything has changed in February, on February 24th, when Vladimir Putin started the invasion into Ukraine. Of course, as any other independent media, we were broadcasting 24/7 about the war in Ukraine. And we had reporters there in Ukraine. We had a lot of experts from Ukraine. We were showing all these terrible images of Russian rockets bombing civilian houses in Ukrainian cities. And of course, the government was not happy with this fact. So on the fifth day of the war, Russian lawmakers proposed a new law. This is actually two laws. The first law is about so-called fake news information about Russian military activities in Ukraine. The second law is about discreditation of Russian army in Ukraine, which means that if, for example, you report that Russian soldiers killed people in town of Bucha in Kiev region, and if this is not confirmed by Russian Ministry of Defense, then you are spreading fake news information about Russian military activities in Ukraine. Or, for example, if Russian Ministry of Defense is saying that Russian army is only attacking military objects, and you are reporting on the fact that Russian military is attacking houses of civilians and the Russian military is killing civilians in Ukraine, then you are spreading fake news information about Russian military, and you are discrediting Russian military in Ukraine. So on the 5th day of the war, lawmakers proposed this law. Of course, it was not the idea of lawmakers. It was proposed in the presidential administration of Russia in the Kremlin. And on the 7th day of the war, our website, as long as more than 5,000 websites in Russia, was blocked by the government. And the next day, when these laws were adopted by the parliament, we understood that we had two choices. The first choice is to become a part of a news department of Russian Ministry of Defense, and to only spread their information about how wonderful activities of Russian army in Ukraine are, and how is everything good. Or the second choice was to continue working as we've been working over these last 12 years and go to jail up to 15 years. We decided that we need to stop operating, that we need to leave the country and continue working from the abroad, because it became absolutely impossible to work in Russia. Plus, I was receiving threats, and my wife, who is news director at TV Range, she was receiving threats as well by the phone calls, by messages in messengers, in Telegram, in WhatsApp, and in SMS messages. Also, they turned us off in cable networks in Russian regions, and we received a visit from Russian police, who was trying to understand whether there was some signs of extremistic information in our shows. And so we left the country, and in mid-July, we relaunched our TV station from 3 locations. The first location is Riga, Latvia, where I am based now with the majority of our team. We have another studio in Tbilisi, Georgia, and the third studio in Amsterdam, Netherlands. We see that our audience is growing every month. For example, last month we had 14 million viewers in Russia, more than 25 million viewers all over the world. But in Russia, 14 millions, which is the most important thing to us, because our goal, I hate the word mission, but still our mission is to spread the independent information for the Russian audience. And the path of TV Rain is more or less the path of all the independent media in Russia these days. Because in Russia, there is no independent media now. The page of modern Russian history, freedom of expression, free press, has been turned. Now there is no independent media in Russia. But we know that the eagerness of Russian audience, of Russian people, to get independent and real information about what is happening in Russia and what is happening in Ukraine and what is happening in other parts of the world is very high, is very big. We see it when we see our statistics, when we see the number of our viewers, or when we see the number of viewers of, for example, Meduza, one of the main Russian news websites, or by the number of readers of Novaya Gazeta, who is also based now here in Riga, Latvia, or other independent outlets in other independent outlets who were forced to leave the country, just like we did, TV Rain. So, and this is a very important thing, because when we see the official polls in Russia telling us that 86% of Russian population support the war, and that 86% of Russian population support the Putin, we understand that this is lie, but we do not have any like proofs to tell why we think that it is a lie. And when we see that so many millions of Russians are watching independent information, we perfectly understand that these people, they do not support the war in Ukraine, and that the number of those who actually support the war in Ukraine is much lower than 86%. That's why I think that continuing doing what TV Rain and other Russian independent outlets are doing is very important for a Russian audience, is very important for the peace in Ukraine, and I'm sorry for such words, is very important for the world.
Thank you so much, Tikhon. And as Kate said in the chat, if you have questions, please type your name in the chat and we'll call you in order. But I'd like to start off briefly by asking just kind of what you just touched on in a very heavy propaganda environment. How difficult has it been for you and your staff at TV Rain to pursue the truth, both in Russia before the war, just like leading up to, but also now? Has it gotten more challenging because you're not on the ground? If you could briefly explain those.
Sure. Well, first of all, about Russian propaganda, I think we all failed. Russian independent journalists, because for all of us, before the war, Russian propaganda was something very funny, because they were telling absurd things and we were laughing at them. We were thinking that the main figures of Russian propaganda are just some funny idiots, and that no one that no one can actually believe them, because this is just nonsense. But after the beginning of the war, we understood how wrong we were. And now we understand that these people, these representatives of the Russian propaganda, they are actually, they are war criminals who are, I think, ones of the most important people in the beginning of this war, because they were they were feeding Russian population with this propaganda for so long that now a lot of people in Russia are actually thinking that the Earth is not that the Earth is, I don't know, is not as we think it is, and that the United States wants to destroy Russia with biologically born mosquitoes, etc., etc. So so this is a very strong enemy, unfortunately. This is the first thing. The second thing is that this propaganda can be beaten, but it can be beaten only if you understand who your enemy is. And I think those who are infected by this propaganda, you have to talk to them as you talk to the people who are ill. You have to be patient. You have to, well, for years, the problem with the propaganda, that the propaganda pictures a very beautiful picture of the world, a very beautiful reality. if you have only one source of information, and a lot of people, they have only one source of information in Russia, I mean, when you watch the TV, you live in the country where you are lucky to live because your country is strong. All other countries are not as strong as you are. They all are jealous at you. United States are going to be destroyed very soon because it has so many internal problems, and Russia is the only place to be in. And when you see how life is wonderful, you don't think about the fact that you don't have a gas in your house or that your toilet is out in the streets and not in your house. You don't have a time to think about it. You only think about how great your country is because you were told about it by the TV station. And to explain to the people that the situation is completely different, you have to be patient. You have to have a lot of arguments. You have to be absolutely sure in what you are telling them. It's a very long job. It's a very long path to explain people what is actually happening. But what is interesting, for example, last month we see that we received new viewers which have never been watching TV Rain, Dozhd. These were the viewers who were affected by this military draft announced by Vladimir Putin, because the idea of propaganda during this war is that first, it is not a war; it is special military operation. Special military operation, it is something small, somewhere far from you. It's the first thing. The second thing is that this is special military operation. It is not about you. You should live your own life. Go to the restaurants, raise your kids, plan your vacations. Somewhere far from you, there is this special military operation. Don't think about it. That's why first months of the war, they were recruiting people, not from recruiting people as soldiers, not from big cities. They were recruiting people from national republics such as Buryatia or other poor republics in Russia, because they don't want to make people in big cities to be, they don't want to make them annoyed or they don't want to make them angry. And right after they faced the first problems on the ground, when they realized that they need more men, and when they announced this military draft, they started to recruit people in the big cities as well. And that's when these people, because one thing when you are sitting on your couch and you are watching TV about some special military operation somewhere far from you, and that completely different situation when someone tells you you have to go to the war, you have to kill someone, and probably you will be killed as well. That's when these people, they start to understand that the reality is completely different from what they've been told by the TV. And that's when they go to have an independent information, such as TV Rain, for example. And that's when we have to be patient in explaining to them how the world actually is in reality.
No, thank you. Maria, I see you have a question.
Yes, hello. Thank you for coming here. Actually, I'm watching your TV station, and I have a question. So, about the future, as you know, now the propaganda is overwhelming, and the Russian government tries to even stringent strengthen the censorship, to now to draft even more laws that kind of prohibit any spread of information concerning not only war, but now LGBT propaganda, all this stuff. So the people are afraid to even share the news, as they were before, share repost the news. So what do you think like about the future of independent media, especially when they're now like abroad? Do you think like there would be the gap like broadening between like the population of Russia and the media who cannot actually operate inside Russia, or like do you have like more optimistic view on the whole situation? Thank you.
Thank you so much for your question. Thanks for watching TV Rain. Well, I'm absolutely optimistic about the future, and I'm optimistic about what will happen. I think it's very important to understand that the again, what we hear in a polls, we hear that 86% of Russian population supports the war. We understand that it's not true. We understand that we can talk about three groups of Russian population. The first one is those who oppose the war, but they are afraid to speak out because that's too dangerous. They could be put in jail only for calling the war. The second part of the population on the other flank are aggressive minority, pro-war, those who are fed by this propaganda and who support each and every word by Russian government. And in between, there is the biggest part of the population who are for hesitating, who are not believing anyone, etc., etc. I think that Russian independent media should talk to these people mostly, because this is the most important part of the Russian population now. And I think that I don't think that's a big problem that Russian media are not in Russia now. I mean, it's a problem for us, for our families. We want to be back home, but I mean, in terms of reporting, it's not as this problem is not as huge as I thought it would be, because now it's not 1970, and we are not Radio Svoboda, Radio Free Liberty, and there is no Iron Curtain, and still there is a lot of tools to go through all these restrictions. I'm absolutely sure that progress is always one step ahead of the repressions, and young, smart men, or women, I'm not one of them. I don't understand anything in the technology, but I'm absolutely sure that each time they will have an answer to any new restriction imposed by the Russian government. And if we look at how situation is evaluating last 6 months, we see that Russian government is not succeeding in its restrictions. Of course, it's terrible. It's frightening. It's horrible, but it doesn't look like the acts of someone who is in a strong position. It's to me, it looks like actions of someone who doesn't have any strategy, and the only strategy he tries to use is to ban everything. But as I said, to any new restriction, there's an answer from the technology.
Thank you, Maria, for that great question. And Professor Combs, I see you have a question.
Yes, thank you so much, Tikhon. It's a fascinating discussion, and we applaud your great courage in doing this work and trying to bring truth, in places that it has such difficulty reaching. I had two quick questions for you. One is you drew an interesting distinction between, before the draft and after the draft, right? Before the draft, people could, maybe even recognize that a lot of what they were hearing was propaganda, but just put it to the side because they're living their lives and they're ostensibly living a better life due to the comparisons the media is making. So one question I have about that is, assume a world in which there was a free press in Russia and people did understand what the war was really about and how the rest of the world viewed it. Do you think people would necessarily care? Or is the only real concern, as you say, when the draft comes in, then all of a sudden it impacts me? So that's question number one. The other, I think, maybe broader question is, a lot of the time in democracies, you are elected officials are playing to the press because they obviously have to care what their public opinion is. There's another election coming up soon, etc. I'm assuming President Putin doesn't have to worry in the same way about, having a free election that would oust him. And so again, assuming the Russian people actually understood what was going on, do you think that President Putin has enough political power to withstand negative opinions? Maybe now, the Russian people understand the true situation. Can he still maintain power in a world in which there was, honest information exchange?
Thank you, Nancy. Well, I think that these two questions, they are connected. Well, I think that free press cannot exist without other institutions of democracy. Free press cannot exist without free justice. Free press cannot exist without normal police system. Free press cannot exist without elections. These all parts of the democracy, they're connected. And when we are speaking about the war and the free press, we perfectly understand that if in Russia we had a free press, the real free press, not just three big independent media like our TV station, Novaya Gazeta newspaper, and the radio station of Moscow, like we had before the war. If we had an actual free press with an access to because TV Rain before 2014, TV Rain was in each and every house. That's why they cut us off main cable and satellite networks. So we had around, as I said, 18 million people, but it's a big number, but it's nothing if you compare it to the whole situation in the country. So again, if we had a real free press situation in Russia, there would be no war, because it would be the completely different situation, a different country, and Russian government would not have the reasons for the war. The reasons, but by the reasons I mean the population brainwashed, big part of the population which was brainwashed. And this is the answer to your second question, because if there is the main idea, one of the main ideas of the Russian propaganda over these years was that politics is dirty, democracy is broken, change anything, everyone is lying. So let's build a social contract. You are not involved in politics, and we're not touching you. That's why I'm telling about mobilization, about draft, because with the draft, this contract was dissolved by the government, because the idea of the contract was that you live in your house. We now have high prices on the oil. That's why you have more money than you used to have in the 90s. You can afford a car. You can afford 2 vacations in Turkey during your summer or winter breaks, and you have a beautiful TV set at your beautiful apartment. So sit there, don't think about politics because politics are dirty. Don't think about elections because look at the election in the United States. They were also a lot of frauds there. So let's not think about elections. Just sit home. And a lot of people, they were absolutely fine with this type of agreement. But one day on September 21st, someone knocked at their door and told them, hello, we're here. We want to take you to the war and we want you to kill someone there. And probably, as I said, you will be killed there. This is the end of the contract. This is the biggest mistake by the Putin, because at the end of the day, he is the victim of his own propaganda as well, because he thought that his army was strong. He thought that it would be possible to capture Kyiv in a 5 days, like they were telling on a TV. And he thought that his army looks like he sees during these parades on the Red Square in May, but in reality, it is not. The funny thing that that it looks like he needed a free press, just like we all need, because as I said, at the end of the day, he's the victim of this propaganda.
Thank you, Professor Combs. And Kate, I know you wanted to quickly say something before we continue with the questions.
I saw that Dana is asking a question. I wanted to make a quick comment to everyone who may not know this, but the reason Tikhon is speaking with us, we're so honored, is because of the work of Vena, Sasha, and Dasha Prokhorov. The whole family made the contacts for us to TV. So it was a lot of work. I just thought everyone should know that without them, this would not be happening. So now I will mute, and I'd love to hear what Dena's question is.
Well, thank you, Kate. It's not so at all. It's all your work. And thank you very much, Tikhon, for coming and talking to us. We're avid viewers of Dozhd, the entire family, as Kate said. And thank you for the great work. So I have two questions, and they're also connected and maybe, impossible to answer as well. So kind of the assumption that a lot of people in Russia do not get information because of a very aggressive, at least at the beginning, information blockade seems to be a little of, misunderstanding, because you can get a VPN, you can listen to alternative news sources, right? So it's kind of a willful ignorance on the part of many. So do you think people choose to be oblivious, choose to kind of still follow that imaginary social contract, right, that by now is clearly disassembled, right, by the mobilization? And my second question is an absolute military defeat of Russia on the battlefield a precondition for people to actually, various people, various groups for various reasons, to actually start, disagreeing, because obviously the elites have one reason, the party of war has another reason, your average citizen who doesn't want to go and die has other reasons as well. Thank you.
Well, first of all, thank you so much for kind words. These questions are very difficult. I will try to answer. Answer to the first question. I have two answers for the first question. First of all, I think that people are lazy. I am lazy. When before I had to leave Moscow, I've never had VPN. And even though I was reading, for example, Ukrainian websites, and a lot of them were blocked by the government, I was lazy enough not to download VPN, and I was like reading other websites. So of course, when you have access to everything is easy. And when you have to take some steps to get access to everything, it's much more difficult. And you just have a lot of errands to make, a lot of things to do. Maybe you just don't have these 5 minutes to find the VPN. And when you find a VPN, it is already blocked by the government. So you have to find another VPN, and it is also blocked by the government. And you say, okay, no, damn it, I don't want to do it. So this is the first answer. The second answer is I had an interview a couple of months ago with a French member of a European Parliament from France. His name is I don't remember his name. Benjamin Guetta. He used to work as a journalist, and he used to work in Russia, and he worked in Russia in early 90s and during Perestroika before that. And we were talking about Russian society with him because he was one of the authors of the letter of members of European parliaments in which they wrote that there are Russians and there are Russians. So like don't cancel the nation. And we were talking about this letter with him, and he told me a very interesting thing about France, that during the war in Algiers, even though they had all the press freedom there, they have radio stations, they have newspapers, Le Monde, Libération, etc., etc., etc. Still, a lot of people, like the majority of people, they were absolutely ignorant to what was happening in Algiers and to all these terrible crimes committed by the French government. Why? Because if you and let's think about it, talking about Russia, during the years, couple of generations were raised on the idea of the Great Patriotic War, Second World War II, and the idea was that our fathers and our grandfathers and our mothers and our grandmothers, they were fighting terrible Nazis. These terrible Nazis were killing innocent people, and our fathers and mothers, they were fighting these terrible Nazis, and they won. Now, if you read the news, you understand that the situation has completely changed, and that the fundament of your life is destroyed, because now you have to accept that your army is doing the same things which terrible Nazis were doing 70 years ago, and your mothers and fathers were fighting them. When you accept that your life has changed and that the fundament of your life was destroyed, you have to act somehow, because your life is destroyed. What could you do? Emigrate? No, you don't have money, you don't have a job there, and now it's not that easy to enter, for example, European Union with a Russian passport. Go and protest out in the streets. You know that you will be arrested or beaten by the police, or that you will lose your job, and you have mortgage, you have 5 kids, or I don't know, 2 kids. So you tell yourself, let's not think about it, because it's not. I did not vote for Putin. I did not support war, but just don't want to think about the details, because if I think about the details, I have to act somehow. I have to do something, because my life is destroyed. I will just pretend that it's not happening. It's not about me. It's somewhere far from me. I will not open the news. I know how to use VPN. I have VPN because I use VPN to, I don't know, to visit Pornhub. But I don't want to use VPN to visit independent website, because I will be so much upset that I cannot do anything with this terrible situation. I think it's also one of the answers to your question, and basically this is one of the challenges that we have, because our goal is to explain to these people that this war is not far, and this war is not about you. This war is about every one of us, and is about every one of you.
Thank you, Elena. And Kate, you have a question.
Hi, thank you. Actually, this kind of follows off the previous question, because in this country, I think we tend to get in conversations like, oh, there's restrictions on media, on how people make their decisions about what they see and what is truth, whereas we're grappling with that here in this country and well, in multiple countries. And I guess I don't want to pry too much in your background, but I think what's interesting is, so you grew up in as you said, a system where maybe media is controlled generally, and yet somewhere along the way you had developed this skepticism, this you were in the news media, this awareness, need to do something independent, and I just didn't know if that came from how you grew up or your education, because I struggle with even neighbors who only watch one kind of news and they're very firm. But you seem to have had a healthy skepticism or your whole life, or was there a moment when you thought, I'm seeing too much disinformation? So at the risk of being personal, I'm just curious why you're different. I mean, you're unique, so.
Well, speaking about me, it's very simple. I'm from a family of Russian human rights activists and dissidents, so it was obvious from the beginning. But the history of TV Rain is much more interesting in this sense, because in 2010, so how was it in the Soviet Union? It was like in the corner you would have an icon and you would have a TV. So two main parts of your apartment. Every evening, you with your family, you are watching TV. And for a lot of people in big cities, in Moscow and St. Petersburg, they're at the mid at 2005, 2006, 2007. They still had this habit of watching TV, but there was nothing interesting for them on the TV, because it was only propaganda and bad talk shows. And so the founder of TV Rain, Natalia Sindeeva, she was like the representative of Moscow, very successful elite, and she was a part of what is called in Moscow creative class. And she decided to open a TV station for people like her, who love watching TV, but they don't have a TV station to watch because all the TV stations are propaganda and bad shows. And then, and at the beginning, it was basically the TV station of lifestyle programs, like let's talk about culture, let's talk about fashion, let's talk about social problems, and just a little bit about politics. And then, but the idea was to make live programs. Almost all the Russian TV is not live; it is pre-recorded. And here, the idea was to make live programs. And in a couple of months after the beginning of Dozhd, there was a huge riot of Russian nationalists in the center of town, and we were showing it live, and we saw how many viewers were watching it, because people, for the first time in years, people in St. Petersburg or in Vladivostok or somewhere else, they had an opportunity to actually watch what is happening and not to watch what TV presenters want them to see. So we just turned on the cameras and we showed what was happening there. Then in a year, there was elections in a state Duma in Russia, and these elections were rigged. And we sent our reporters to work as part of commissions and they were filming all the frauds during the election. And then there were rallies and anti-government rallies in Moscow and in other cities. And again, we just turned off the cameras and we were showing to the people. So that's how month by month this TV station was shifting from a lifestyle TV station about how beautiful our and interesting our life can be to the situation where we are now, like the news TV stations.
Thank you, Kate. I have another question. There's, as you spoke about, there is, I think, not just in Russia, but everywhere, this ignorance of people to tune out, what's going on because it's so far away, but there is still a subset, albeit probably a minority, that does take to the streets. They do, despite the risks, protest, and also we've seen that in Moscow as well. How has the bravery of those individuals on the ground helped kind of support your work in kind of promoting to Russians, that there is a war, that this isn't right, and the government should be held to account?
I think one of the most important things for us now is to tell to the people in Russia who are watching our TV station, and if they are watching our TV station, it's obvious that they are against the war, is to show to them that they are not alone. Because the problem with the propaganda is that propaganda has all the tools to spread itself. And that's why it seems that everyone is pro-war, because you hear propaganda from radio stations, from TV stations, from, I don't know, radio stations in a bus or somewhere else. And when you are against the war, you feel that you are alone. So our goal now here is to show to the people that it is not true, that a lot of people are just like you, our viewer, who is against the war in your small town somewhere in Russia, for example. And it's very important to us that people in Russia are ready to support us. I mean, by donations, they are ready to support us by sharing our shows and sharing it with their friends. I'm not sure if it's the answer to your question.
No, that is helpful. Like your role in complementing and showcasing that people are not alone when they do take these risks. And just a quick follow-up to that before we get to Sasha, I know you have a question. The role of social media too, how that has kind of changed the dynamic for journalists, especially now that anyone can publish. How have, especially now being out of Russia, how have you encountered how social media can both help your cause, as you are, engaged on YouTube and a lot of other social media platforms, but have you also, has it also hindered your mission?
Well, it's the very important question, and the answer could be like for 2-hour discussions. Social media is the best thing for media and is the most terrible thing for the media. It's the best thing because it's very easy to get information about. We're sitting in Riga. We need to know what is happening in, I don't know, in Marseille. I don't know why Marseille, but let's say Marseille in France. And in a minute we know it because someone tweeted something. He made a picture. He tweeted a picture. someone retweeted it, then again someone retweeted it, and then in a couple of minutes we have this picture here in Riga. And it's wonderful because then we can write to account of the first person on Twitter, and he, for example, could go on air on TV Rain, for example. That's wonderful. Why it is the most terrible thing? Because this first person, he could, for example, Photoshop the picture, but it will go viral no matter what, because journalists now, and it's our mistake as well, journalists now become very lazy to get to in order to prove the information, and that's the biggest problem. But if we're speaking about our situation, that now we're here in Russia and we need to get information from Russia, of course social media are very important, because, for example, when we the information about the deaths among Russian soldiers is Russian government is trying to hide this information, and social media is the best way to get information, because you find the communities, for example, of wives of Russian soldiers, or you find the chats on WhatsApp of widows of those who was drafted last month, and you get in touch with them and you get information from them, etc., etc. So no, it's social media is very important, but you always have to keep in mind that at the same time social media is very dangerous, because it's very easy to fool you with the social media.
Thank you. And Sasha.
Thank you, Tikhon. Thank you for all the work you're doing and for talking to us today. I have a question about a recent legislation adopted by the Russian Parliament, Duma, anti-LGBT legislation. Could you please comment on the timing of adopting these new laws against the LGBT community in Russia this fall? And do you see any connection to the ongoing aggression against Ukraine? Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I think that everything which is happening in Russia now is connected with the aggression against Ukraine, because any other life has stopped in Russia. Everything is connected with the war. And I think that this legislation anti-LGBT was not adopted now by accident. I mean, it's connected with the war. I think the reason is that and it's not only this legislation. If you look at what Russian officials are texting on their social media, if you look at what they or Russian propagandists are saying on the state TV, you will see that they are trying to create a new situation where there is us and there is they. We are normal and you are not normal. You are gays, you are, I don't know, you don't believe in God. So like these crazy ultra conservative values, which they are trying to show that we are like the last place on earth where everything is fine, and they are not fine. And if we lose in this war in Ukraine, then we will have, as President Putin said, parent number one, parent number two. This is completely absurd. This is just stupid. But they have to sell somehow this war and this conflict with the West to the population. at the beginning, they were trying to sell it with these words about denazification and demilitarization. And they were trying to sell this war as the opportunity to not let in NATO closer to the border. But even those who are not reading a lot of news, they heard that NATO soon will be closer to our border, but not because of Ukraine, but because of Sweden and Finland. And of course, people are getting, even if people are not, even if people are trying to hide themselves from the news, but they see these footages from Ukrainian cities and they see videos of normal people just like them, who are not like crazy Nazis with the swastikas on their foreheads. So now it's time to sell something new. Now it's time to explain the war with a new reason. And the new reason is the war between civilizations. That, for example, Russian ex-president Medvedev, today he posted absolutely crazy post on his Telegram that it is that now we are having something like a desatanization, and that our enemy is Satan. And so that's crazy, but they are trying to sell it to the population. Frankly, I don't think that it could be sold because like because that's too much, but we'll see.
Thank you, Sasha. And we are unfortunately running low on time, but I wanted to end by asking one more question. Earlier, you had expressed your optimism over independent news and independent news for Russia. What are you excited about for TV Rain going forward?
Well, I'm optimistic about TV Rain because I see two important things. The first thing is the level of the number of viewers, and the second thing is the number of donations. It's not because I want to get really rich, but it's because it's very important when you see that your audience is ready to pay to support you with the money. It means that this means something for your audience. It's really important, and we have a lot of plans. We are making several very interesting stories which will be published soon. Also, a couple of weeks ago, we launched our YouTube channel in English, because we want to spread the information for English-speaking audience as well. It is called TV Rain Newsroom on YouTube, but our main goal is to go back home as soon as possible. We think that we can do something to make it happen sooner. So we just need to work harder, and we hope we will succeed in it.
I think I speak for everyone to say, we hope you can make it home soon as well. And we so thank you for all of the work and the risks you and your wife and the rest of your staff are taking at TV Rain to promote independent news. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us today.
Thank you.
Professor Combs, I'll kick it back to you.
I just want to second everything that Rachel said, and just highlight there are those of us who talk a lot about human rights and who spend our lives thinking about press freedoms and talking about it, and then there are people who are doing it, and there's a real distinction, and we could not be more honored to have had you with us today and trying to spread the word as well as you can to the widest possible audience. So we're truly grateful.